Welcome to High Stakes, episode 28. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. High Stakes is produced by Mike Lawrence. You can find him on Twitter at Awesemo. And our guest today is the reigning DraftKings Best Ball Millie Maker winner, Felix Castro, who you can find on Twitter at Crying Buffalo. His DraftKings username is tcastro1988, and he was a high school classmate of best ball thought leader Eric Beimfohr. Felix, let's start with this. How did you get into best ball? Was Eric Beimfohr instrumental in getting you into best ball, or is that just a huge coincidence that Eric is, one of I would say one of the bigger names in best ball, one of the guys who does the most content related to it, and then of course you come in from the same high school and win a millie. I believe your first year doing it. Is that coincidental, or was he instrumental in getting you into it?
Extremely, coincidental. We happened to be in the same draft on DraftKings. I saw an Beimfohr. I'm like, how many Beimfohrs could there really be in this field? And I messaged him later on. And I was like, hey, it's kind of crazy. We're both doing this, thing. Good luck, on that draft and whatever. And I kept seeing him here and there, and like, I'm gonna see what he's doing outside. I checked his Facebook. He wasn't on Facebook, and so I checked his Twitter. I googled or searched his Twitter name, and he was everywhere. So I'm like, oh, he's really into this. Like, I did it the year before that, okay. And I maxed the $3, pretty much all right out first round, and so I was like, I'm gonna give it another try, and obviously I got lucky.
What was the $3 2 years ago? Was that a 150 max or a 20 max?
It was just 20 max, yeah.
Okay, so you stepped your toes in lightly your first year in best ball, didn't have a ton of success, maybe a little bit of success, and then last year was it a $20 buy-in?
Yes, $20 buy-in, 150.
Did you play 150?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had just won a 50K on an NBA basketball playoff tournament the day before. Yeah.
Nice. Oh wow. So that's what got you into best ball. You were just like, I got this money in my DraftKings account, might as well keep going on this best ball thing. That's really awesome. Yep. Okay, before we continue the conversation too much, Terry Florida Boy 420 on Twitter asked, what is best ball? And I actually thought that's probably a good question to answer on these streams. I've done a few streams about best ball, and I've never answered that question. Do you have, I assume as the best ball millie maker, you've probably been asked this question before. What is best ball? Do you have a good description of what best ball is?
Well, I had my family all ask me what it was, and I had to try to give them the basics. It's fantasy football, the year round, where you don't have to mess with your lineups, and it puts in the most optimal team throughout the year.
Yep, it's a roster of on DraftKings. It would be a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and then a flex spot. You draft 20 players, and each week they put in the optimal lineup. Whoever scores the most points at each position, they put that player into your spot, and that goes for 14 weeks. The first round, you are competing in the group of 12 people that you drafted with, or however many people are in the draft, generally 12. You are competing against those players, and whoever puts up the most points moves on to the second round, which would be week 15. This is coming up this week, which is why I thought this week would be the right week to bring you on, because now we have just finished the regular season of best ball. I guess they call it round 1, but I call it the regular season. Now we essentially start the playoffs. Week 15 is going to be round 2, or really round 1 of the playoffs, and then I believe on Underdog now it would be a group of 16, and just one person moves on from round 2. Is it the same do you know what the structure is for DraftKings this year?
It's the same as it was last year, from what I know. It's 1 of 12.
Okay, so you're gonna be
for the next 2 rounds, and then it's 1,000-person final practically.
Yep. So you're randomly assigned a new group of 12 people on DraftKings. You have to win that group to move on to round 3, and then round 3. I again don't know the number. Do you remember what the number was last year
for Underdog,
or for DraftKings?
It was both. It was 2 rounds of 12, and then one person advances, and then last year the final was 200 people.
Yeah, and it's essentially a large GPP at the end. All the people who moved on after round 3 are grouped then together in one large GPP, and first place wins a millie and a Tournament of Champions ticket. I assume that is still the case this year. That was the case last year. I know that because Felix won it, and I very briefly got to meet Felix at the Tournament of Champions. Unfortunately, we didn't actually spend that much time hanging out, but we at least met briefly, so that was fun to see you there. So I think that's a pretty good explanation of best ball. Good enough, I think, for the conversation. Do you have anything else you want to add?
the we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about the
We'll talk.
groupings. The groupings is it's the whole thing. Like in my opinion, that nobody talks about. It's I'll still talk about it later. But I'm gonna talk about it right now. It
Yeah, let's talk
is
about it.
yeah. It like my worst team got through each week. Like that team that got through went to the finals and won it was my worst team every single week that threw,
No
and it was
way.
the one that scored all the points week 17. It's why I have like huge stands in general is because you can't predict when with what each team is going to do well. Like if you have an idea what's going to do well, you should probably spend more time playing that same kind of team because it could easily get bounced in one round and in one grouping, and it might do really well in the other one, and it might win you $1 million in week 17.
All right. So now let me ask you an opinion related to that. Do you think it would be better instead of having these second groups of 12 or whatever to just put everybody into one group and just have the top six, or I guess the top 12th on DraftKings, the top 16th on Underdog, just put everybody in one group each week and just have that number move on? Is that you're in agreement with that?
Yes.
Even though you won a milli last year with your lineup that would have been kicked out in earlier rounds?
I like again, my lineups were practically the same in each
Okay.
round, and all those lineups would have. I probably would have went one through four had all those lineups gone through.
Okay. Wow. Okay. that's
Yeah,
that's crazy. So they were you really, I mean, I know this about you. You really take stands in best
yeah,
ball. That's a funny thought that you could have done even better if they had structured it a different way. Okay,
yes,
so I think that I'm on the same page as you. I don't like the randomized groupings because you could just have a great team that's put in a group with a bunch of great teams with similar players and
right. Or
you know
somebody who optimized just for week 15. You know, like
right.
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough can be a tough draw. I think I'm with you. I think I'd prefer just large groups for each one, and the top X percentage move
Mm-hmm.
on would probably be the ideal structure. All right, so we're talking strategy a little bit. Let's start by talking about last year. Actually, let's start. Let's go back to the beginning again. So you said you played you maxed out the $3.20 entry 2 years ago, and that was all you played. How did you get into best ball originally? Do you remember like how you even heard about best ball 2 years ago or how you got in?
I think I was because back then I was just trying to get ready for week one of DFS, and then I saw the little tab that said best ball, and I clicked on it and just played one. Then I got a little bit of the
Oh,
little
I
bit
know.
of the opioid feel of it. So yeah,
Yeah, it's I very much understand the addiction of
yeah,
doing drafts. Like people don't understand that it's not just the sweat of the actual contest. Like there are sweats within the drafts of like, is my stack going to come back to me? My stack partner, like
yeah.
you can feel really good about certain drafts. So there's a sweat related there. It's definitely a little bit of a high just doing a draft.
I think
Maybe
the best part of like sometimes the fantasy football is just the drafting part. Like it's you get to use your creative mind of telling a story throughout the entire season.
yep, yep, absolutely. Yeah, you did a pretty good job of telling that story last year. Worked out really well. Let's talk about last year a little bit. So you said that you maxed out 150 entries. What did your exposures look like last year? Were you very condensed last year, taking big stands already?
Yeah, yes. It's kind of hard to tell on DraftKings as they don't really give you a way to look at it. And Spike
True.
Week has this amazing tool this year called Draft IQ. Where you can see all your lineups and whatnot, but on there you can't really see what your exposures are, how much high, how low. You had to go through each lineup. Luckily, I did know who I was drafting for the most part, and I know that I had roughly 75 to 80% Cooper Cup, and roughly in that same area with Jamar Chase. I
Okay.
took and I had about 90% Colin Johnson, which nobody, will know about. But if had he done well, it would have been great.
Yeah, so he was not helping you, but Cooper Cup and Jamar Chase last year, that was kind of a cheat code to have those two in just about every draft,
Yeah,
or in
and
a good number of drafts at least.
it's like I had them, but they were going at the same area, like them and Chris Godwin. He was one of my higher owned
Okay.
receivers, and they were all kind of going the same spot. So instead of focusing too much on my round two player, I was taking like Cooper Cup in round two, and I would go Chris Godwin and Jamar Chase, and it was just switching up the ADP because I don't believe in ADP.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean ADP is not necessarily the best indicator of what you should do. If you believe in the intelligence of crowds, I guess ADP is worth something. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you think the crowd is getting it wrong, it's definitely worthwhile to exploit that. That's the same concept we talk about frequently in DFS, to be exploitative when the field is getting something wrong. Take advantage of that and maybe go over the field on a player if people are drafting him too late. Yeah, it's definitely an intelligent approach. I gotta say, with Cooper Cup, I was all in 2 years ago. I think because of the Stokastic rankings 2 years ago, they loved him like relative to every other site, and I got to a ton of Cooper Cup 2 years ago. And then this year, I think they still liked him better than like other places Cooper Cup, but I think I was closer to the field. Sorry, I mean last year, yeah, I was close to the field on Cooper Cup. So missed out on the real explosion where he was like a fourth rounder, and I was torn because it was Cooper Cup or Robert Woods last year, right? And I
Yeah.
did not take any major stand. Did you have a good amount of Robert Woods, or did you have
I had zero Robert Woods. I knew
wow?
like I made the stand like this guy is gonna blow up. He actually is a good quarterback. Then this whole breakfast thing came out, and it was like even harder to get Cooper Cup. So I'm like, I had to take this guy around too, so I can get the other combinations of Cooper Cup and whatnot.
Wait, you were taking Cooper Cup in round? I feel like his ADP was like around round
It
four
was like
last year.
late round 3, early round 4.
Okay, and you were taking him in round two.
Yeah, because if you want like a lot of one player,
Yep.
you kind of have to reach. And again, I knew that Chris Godwin last year was going that early, so I knew that I needed to reach on Cooper Cup if I wanted Chris Godwin as well, kind of deal. And I didn't in the draft that wanted. That's not how it happened, but I think that draft was a little bit earlier in the season.
Okay. So Cooper Cup in round two, that certainly helpful to take him there. Zero Robert Woods. I knew that you were a stand taker. I did not know that you were taking that big of stands where,
Yeah.
because for me, those were like, I don't really know. These guys they're kind of interchangeable to me. I'll take Cooper Cup here. I'll take Robert Woods in the next one.
There was a little bias in this. My first 50K came from a Cooper Cup,
Okay.
Chris Godwin stack. So
Oh, that's awesome.
it was a little bit of bias, and it's kind of worked out. Kind of worked out for me.
Yep. Definitely worked out. So you had 150 on DraftKings last year. Did you play at all in Underdog last year?
I played 11 and advanced 5 last
Okay.
year. Yeah.
It's a great advancement rate. Not a high number of drafts. Did you move any on beyond? I assume you had Cooper Cup there as well.
Yeah, I had Cooper Cup, Jamar Chase. I had the whole shebang. I had one make it to the third round, which I guess the third round right before the finals, and it certain things had worked out a different way. I probably would have won the million on there, but again, that third round is just it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, that is very true. Okay, so those are your big stands. Sounds like your big stands worked out with the exception of Colin Johnson last year, and just having those players, I guess, right? Did you? So I'll beyond just the player selections, were you, or to what extent were you correlating your lines? Like, were you just doing correlations along the lines of quarterback with wide receivers? Were you worried about like the playoff weeks? How much did that kind of stuff factor into your builds last year?
Last year, it was only just let's get as many team stacks as I can. The team that won it has like a 4 stack. It had Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, Leonard Fournette, and Rob Gronkowski on that team. And it's like I watch a lot of Awesemo slash last year, Stokastic, and I was watching Laffy. He kept talking about let's different teams, and he kept bringing up the Bucks like they could be a super house. You might want as many of them as you can get, and I took it to heart.
And it worked out for you.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And then continuing on with so you were doing quarterback with wide receivers. So Justin McMahon actually sent this question today. Felix, do you think researching week 17 matchups before the season starts is a complete waste of time? Asking for a friend who thinks it's a ridiculous waste of time. I'm not sure who's throwing shade at. I think that might be
it's at Liam.
Adam Scher. It's at Liam.
I think so. Well, maybe it's Adam Scher too. Well, I think it's because and Pete, everybody who's on this week 17 thing. All right. So we were talking about this before the show about my big board versus my regular. My big board, I'm advancing about 50%. And I just focus on drafting the best players, at their certain positions. And
we should say, let me just clarify, sir. So I had to ask you this before the show. So I want to say the big board is drafts that took place before the rookie draft this year.
Yes. And then, so I focused on, a couple rookies at the end of the drafts, and mainly focused on like just drafting the best know, like what we know of, like from players. And then I've once BBM3 came out, I started focusing on week 17, and not like that would make my decisions only based on week 17, but if there was a player kind of close, I would, kind of gravitate towards that grouping of players.
Yep.
And I think that kind of messed me over, even though the guy that just took down a million, King Cap, he had a lot of week 17 correlation. So maybe it's good for the regular season as well, but
that's just that's just a coincidence that it worked out during the regular season, because I mean, if you're planning for week 17, I think that's
but my advance rate is not good so far. I mean, to be fair, I did draft like the number one bust of round one, so it is
number one bust of round one. Who would be? I'm trying to think. That's Jonathan Taylor. I'm blanking on who is in round one.
It's Najee Harris.
Oh, no. I never took him in round one, so that's why I wasn't.
He was going on pick 8-ish area.
Ooh, okay, that explains why I had very little Najee Harris. Yeah. And what? How much Najee Harris did you have this year?
$10,000 worth. I don't know. I had about 70% of Najee Harris throughout all drafts.
Okay. So I want to come back to the dollar amount play, but first I want to finish up this conversation about week 17 matchup. So you say for you, it was essentially a tiebreaker. Like it wasn't something that was really guiding your decisions, but it was, if it came down to two players who you had similar interest in, and one was a bring back on one of your stacks and one was not, you would go with a bring back, or was it more than that?
It was mainly that. If I had to do it over again, I think I would rather just take the high upside player versus the week 17. I think at this point, based on my, what happened to my teams, but it's tough to find. It's tough to answer right now because of how this year's played out so far. But I guess we'll kind of see where it kind of lays. It's going to be kind of an interesting study because my big board teams are so much better than my BBM3 teams.
Okay, that will be interesting to see. Okay, so I took this again as a shot at Adam Sher, because I believe Adam is the one who is anti
he thinks
the week 17 correlation, whereas I think Liam is pretty. I mean, based on our conversation on high stakes, I think Liam was actually one of the first to start factoring in the week 17.
He said he focused on it last year. Yeah, and I think I had one game that was correlating, and it kind of factored a little bit, but it wasn't really a big factor. Like I didn't have one from each team kind of thing, but
yeah, I gotta say I have never really factored it in. This year I started to just a little bit, so I had not even thought about it last year. This year I started to think, well, maybe I should try to do some, like, so I did maybe 5 drafts out of 150. I tried to do like, all right, I'll do a Bills Bengals kind of thing. It was not a huge factor for me, but I think maybe for me that's partially because I've actually never gotten through to week 17. So I'm just like, I just got to get there first. I gotta smell it, and then maybe after I get there and I see my team and it's uncorrelated, and I'm like, I have no shot. Then next year I'll change my strategy. But first I want to make sure I can actually get to week 17. But I think that's one of the more interesting high level conversations that people are having is, how predictive is it? Like people are making assumptions about how good a matchup is in week 17, like how bad this defense is going to be. Players get traded throughout the year, players get hurt. So it's really hard to, I don't know, hard to know exactly how much you should be factored in.
Unless you're really good at player analysis. Yeah.
But if you're really good at player analysis, why do you really want to be correlating instead of just taking the player that you have analyzed and found to be better? I think it's certainly an interesting high level discussion that, maybe I'll start factoring in a little bit more next year. I just think it's so hard to plan for 17 weeks out as opposed to let's just get through first. But I mean, another thing is, so maybe if you don't factor it in, you're going to have higher advance rates in general. But I think Liam would be an advocate for, well, it doesn't really matter what your advance rate is. If your teams are correlated and have a shot once you get in, you're going to, do you disagree with that, that it doesn't really matter?
It's coming from a guy that didn't have good advance rates, right? And so my theory is that if you have higher advance rate, this whole variation of what groupings you're in, it's going to kind of dilute that because you're going to have more shots at the totem pole.
Yep.
And I think having a better advance rate is just going to give you a better opportunity to take down the whole thing.
Yeah, that's generally my thought process as well. I want to be advancing teams on each round and then just hope that one of them lucks out. But I can see the merit to doing it. All right. Well, I mean, we were talking about Liam. Is Liam your rival? I mean, you won DraftKings last year. He won Underdog last year. Are you guys rivals for the rest of your lives? Like Bird and Magic kind of thing?
I wouldn't say rivals or anything like that. I like him. Some of his he's very uh he's very with his own thought. He thinks it's either that way or it's like I don't think he can take in another theory. Sometimes
He's opinionated.
which is
Strong-headed.
fine. Yeah,
Yeah, totally. And his other theory is you just got to draft all the Bills all the time.
I was like, you're lucky that the Bills were good because if they were just shit, I don't think you're going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it helps when your favorite team is a great best ball team. But I mean, he's a sharp guy anyway. Aside from his Bills love, his homerism, definitely a sharp player. But yeah, it's pretty funny that you guys. And okay, here's another question. Following up on the Liam discussion. So this year we just saw, and I forgot his name. Or you said the name earlier. The guy who won this year, the regular season Millie.
King Cap, King Capital on Twitter.
Yep.
I know him as King Cap. He's a good guy.
So he just won a milli on Underdog. So that's 2 years in a row. We've had a chess player who's won a milli on Underdog. Are you any good at chess?
No, I mean I know how to play chess, but I am not good at chess. I will not get on their little tournament that they're setting up.
Are they actually setting up? I thought
I think so.
Ducking him. All right.
No, I think he's taking it. I'm putting my money on King Cap.
Actually, yeah, I saw in the video that Liam started talking trash.
Yeah.
In the video, which I enjoyed. Oh, you're putting your money on King Cap. Interesting.
Yeah, I'll put my money on King Cap. Yeah. Well, he gave me a shout out, and he's been a part of he joins my YouTube channel occasionally. So
yeah, I mean, I guess he apparently has the higher score on the chess thing that rates you. I don't understand all of it. I have no idea because I barely know. I don't even think I know all of the rules of chess, so it'd be hard for me to evaluate which one of them I would take in a match. But that's fun if they actually do that. I would enjoy that. I don't know that I'd watch because I wouldn't understand what was happening, but I'd
watch it at 2 times speed later.
yeah, exactly. All right, so last year we've talked. Gone over last year a good amount. Let's talk about this year a little bit. So you, as somebody who took major stands last year, it worked out great. Same thing this year. How's that going?
Not great this year so far, but it's been a lot of fun. My teams struggled early. I built a lot, so my stands that I took on the big board are doing really well, and then my stands that I've switched over on the BBM3 kind of like did well, and then they got a lot of steam from like other people. So then I started losing a little bit on my stance, but the teams on BBM3 are building towards the finals. So I think they're going to do really well in the playoffs. But again, the variance of 15, 16, and 17 of the groupings, we'll see.
So I mean, so that's interesting. So we were just having the conversation about like, well, you want to have a better advance rate versus correlating for week 17. So you didn't have as great of an advance rate this year, right? You said that you advanced very few teams as opposed to last year. I assume. I guess I didn't ask you this. How do you remember what your advance rate was last year?
It was just a hair under 50%,
which is
so I had high. I had 80 or no 69 of the 150 go through, and then I had like the $3.20, and then I did a couple other ones that advanced.
Yeah, so an average advance rate for people listening would be 25 out of 150. Would be 1 out of 6, which is 2 out of 12, which is so that's average, and you got through 69 out of 150, which is very nice. That is a very nice advance rate.
Yeah.
This year though, not such a high advance rate.
I think about 16%, which is about average. I think it is because it's like it's like 8% is the 1 out of 6 is 8, and then so 2 out of 12 is 16%.
Okay. And you played so you played last year. You won the milli on DraftKings. You clearly had a lot more volume on DraftKings. Did you still this year have a lot more volume on DraftKings than Underdog? Where were you putting all this money in?
All my money went to Underdog mainly this year because DraftKings doesn't seem to want to support best ball in any way until the actual NFL season. I wish they would put it just like Underdog would throughout the year, but I get it. I really thought that them not doing it was them like saying, "Hey, we should focus on this and improving the system." That wasn't the case. It's still not the greatest way to view teams, and they don't update the teams right away. So it's a little frustrating that they didn't upgrade it right away, but it is what it is. So yeah, a lot more on Underdog this year.
Okay. Did you still 150 max the $5 milli or do anything like that? Like, so you did play some volume on DraftKings?
Yeah. I maxed the $20 because I wanted to say I was the back-to-back $20 champion, and then
Nice.
uh, I maxed the $5. I did a couple 555s, and I still they run like these resurrection drafts where you can do a draft for the rest of the season. I do one to two a week on those ones.
And as I recall from last year, I actually didn't even look at those this year. As I recall from last year, there was a pretty big overlay on some of those
Yeah,
resurrection. Was that again the case this year?
a couple times, not very much this year, but they're still running out like decent prizes for it. So I'll just put one or two and maybe gets lucky.
Okay. So you played the majority of your volume on underdog this year. Okay, I'm going to actually ask you this question, which I had two questions sort of related. But Trouble 35, I think it's Troubles DK, asked, when you've won 5, 6, 7 figure payouts, how did you adjust your behavior or play to avoid risk of ruin? And what, if any, changes did you make? What bad habits do you have that other players would benefit from being aware of? So how have things changed since you won the milli? I guess is how I or the 50,000. You know, however you want to answer this. What has changed since you started making good money at this?
Not much. I mean, to be honest, my stance took a little. I took even harder stands this year on best ball, but my lifestyle hasn't changed in any way. I still play the dollar. I don't really bet any different other than that way. But my stands on best ball have. I thought this year is kind of like a go all in on a few players, and if that's like the right ticket, I'm gonna have more. I'm gonna look really smart, but obviously it didn't. I have a little advanced rates this year, so it didn't look as great. But I was happy to take that chance on a smaller sweat ish this year. But
Okay. So your lifestyle hasn't changed, but I mean, you said you had like $10,000 down on Najee Harris. Did you play significantly higher volume after your big win last year?
I mean,
Okay.
I have a little extra, so then I
Yeah.
won the
Right.
50K, so I was like, well, why not?
Yeah.
I definitely spent more this year. We are pretty much living off of dividends, and then so my wife's at home, and all the money I make from my job doing a data entry, it's not really anything spectacular. I listen to you guys about 10 hours a day,
Nice.
and and then I come home and I would throw up a few drafts, and it's like it's nothing different. And now that I stream it, it's people want to see different kind of streams and whatnots and different drafts. So
Okay. So you've been doing some of your drafts on stream. That kind of guides you in some ways too.
yeah, the stream drafts are for real. They're tough.
Tough and
People
what you mean it's tough to talk about it while you're doing the draft?
tough to talk about. It's actually fun to talk while you're drafting, but it's tough because I'm talking about kind of my thought process, and it's fun to bounce my ideas off of them. But at the same time, they're hearing those ideas, so it's like, oh, well, I'll just take that player. So it worked. It was a double-headed sword on it, or double-edged sword on it. But
Yeah. So did you run into that where you were doing drafts and you could see people were in your stream and drafting with you?
yeah, it was pretty tough because I have my core following, and they switched their avatar to do the same as mine. So it's like,
Nice.
oh, I got got
That's
four of my
awesome.
guys in here with me. It's gonna be a
That's
tough
really funny.
draft. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's I have been the other guy. I've never been the guy doing the stream, but I've definitely like watched streams and joined the draft so I could draft against the people and as I'm watching their stream. But I have so far been a nice guy. I have not tried to break up their stacks or anything. I just
Yeah.
focus on my team and listen to them at the same time. I have not gone ahead and broken up their stacks. Which I guess I will go to that question I was going to ask you. So Matthew Wiley was on this podcast
Oh yeah,
a
I watched
few
that one. That
episodes
was good.
ago. Yeah, and he mentioned that when he plays best ball, he plays defensively and
I
he
saw
goes out of his
that.
way to break up other people's stacks so that they won't have their full stack. Is that a strategy that you also employ?
If I thought that was a really good idea. Like it really is. I personally don't really do it unless I like that player or I like that team as well. Like he said he would draft the Burrow on somebody else's Higgins and Chase. It, that's fine. You can find a correlation later in the draft if you really want to. You can paired it up with Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst. You could have the
True.
back stack of that one, and you could have had personally potentially the Diggs or Gabe Davis, and you could have correlated it that way. It's a lot of different ways you could do it. It's not like you're hurt if you're taking like in my opinion Derek Carr. I don't think he's a good quarterback. if he would have been the person you're taking, like I don't know if that would have been plus EV, even though they're having their Devontae Adams, Mac Hollins stack or something.
Right. Okay. So you situationally you might consider doing it going forward. It's not something you've done in the past.
Yeah, I'm more worried about my team making the best team I can make, not really
Yep.
worrying about what they can do.
Yeah, and that has generally been, and I don't think that I'm going to start trying to break up other people's stacks because I generally think like I'm concerned about the playoffs, and I'm not concerned about just beating this person in my 12-person draft. I'm concerned about winning this group of 12 and then beating other teams in the playoffs. So I don't try to break up other people's stacks. I'm not sure that it's all that beneficial to you to break up other people's stacks, but I don't know. I guess I can see some merit to it, but for me, it's not the most important thing to do. Let me take a minute away from this conversation with Felix to tell you about our sponsor, OddsShopper. Make your best bets in 30 seconds or less with OddsShopper. With hundreds of bets featured daily, OddsShopper gives you the edge you need betting player props and game lines across all sports. Sign up for free now via the link in the video description below to gain access to our proprietary data, which will help you make your best bets. With expected win percentages and ROIs included, OddsShopper uses the same DFS projections we use here at Stokastic to filter out the best bets available. OddsShopper also features a parlay builder with optimized parlays and an arbitrage tool that identifies risk-free, guaranteed profit bets that you can make across sportsbooks. All right, one question that I wanted to ask that we've kind of touched on, so I think you have largely answered this question. But what's the better platform? I mean, so you won your milli on DraftKings, but it sounds like you don't think DraftKings is actually the best ball platform. Would you say Underdog is the best ball platform? Do you play on Drafters at all? How would you rate the best ball platforms that you have been a part of?
So this is my first year on Drafters. I'm just going to put it out there. I suck at Drafters. It's not even close. I'm probably one of the worst players on Drafters this year. I have one team that's 50 spots away from the bottom. Anyways, between DraftKings and I like Drafters. They have a lot of tools that you can use that I like. They have an exposure page on there, and it's very easy to access. The drafts were like it took forever to fill drafts. That part kind of sucked. But DraftKings, if they would, I like that the fact that you can't upload a CSV and it makes it harder for sharks, in my opinion, like to draft better. On the other hand, it kind of stinks that like the after the drafting phase is so bad. But in all reality, now that Spike Week has this tool where you can pull up your teams, it's really not that bad. They also don't really give it a good way to stream it. I will say that it is fun to stream with my chat, but it's like there's not a really good way to view it.
Interesting.
So I would say Underdog has a better visual.
Is that because is DraftKings is still not possible to draft on a desktop or a laptop? You have to do it on your phone.
I draft on a desktop. Yeah.
So it is possible.
Yeah. It's just, it looks kind of clunky.
Okay. Yeah. Underdog makes it a little bit easier.
There's a board. There's color coding.
Right.
A few extra things.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Hadn't thought about the streaming aspect of it, but yeah, I mean, hesitant to give compliments to a competitor, and Spike Week very much a competitor. They're a Roto Runners product, but I will say Eric has done a great job. I've been
he's my buddy,
I know. No, I'm kidding, and he's also a former guest on the show. I love Eric and Spike Week. I actually just signed up a couple weeks ago to track this stuff, and I have really enjoyed it. So I will compliment that one product, and it does make following on DraftKings much easier. So nice work there by Eric. I'm kidding about not giving compliments. To some extent. Okay. Will Shu asked, I want to know, and I think you probably answered this question. In retrospect, would you have handled Najee and the 101 of your first round picks different? You didn't take him at the 101, did you?
Yep.
You took Najee at the 101.
Okay, so we'll just start there. So I took him at 101, and partially because he won me the milli. He was on the last play. He put it in the end zone and secured it for me. So I had some biases to it, but my thought process was Najee going to 101 was like I can get different combinations of round 2 with him, and I thought Najee would be stellar. To be fair, he got a Lisfranc injury literally day 1 of training camp, and it kind of set him back. And you can kind of see that like he got set back in the beginning of the season, and then once the bye came around, like, as soon as he came back, he Just have some good games, but that's here nor there. It was just a theory of getting different combinations of one player.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is it's important to have biases when you're drafting, because we know, so Liam drafts all Bills. You just draft everybody who's helped you in past tournaments. Yeah. I mean, it was Cooper Kupp, and now I guess Najee didn't actually help you, so it wasn't helpful in this case. But you just got to incorporate your biases into your process. Is what I'm hearing. Is you think that's good advice?
Yes. It's not financial advice, but it is good advice.
I'm not sure that it is good advice. It can work out, but I think maybe for some people it's good advice, but I don't know that it's necessarily worked out with Cooper Kupp though. That was definitely a stand that was worth taking last year. Najee at the 101, maybe a bridge too far. Did not quite work out so well for you this year. But I assume the answer is yes. You would in retrospect handle that a little bit differently.
I mean, if he could have gotten hurt when I was drafting beforehand, that would have been great, because had I not, I would have been 100% 101 Jamar Chase. Like, it was like very close between those two. So, okay. And he's coming around. So, like, I don't know. It depends.
So I would think, I mean, if you were taking him at the 101, was that like every draft? Like, were you consistently, if you could get Najee, you were taking Najee? Like every draft that you had the possibility to take him. So the only way you would not get him is if you had like pick 9, 10, 11, and 12, and he had already been taken.
Occasionally he would go at 2 or 4. I don't know if I was my influence on other people, but he was going at different spots. So occasionally, I think I got like a pick 8 Justin Jefferson, because like different picks were going in front of it, and like I was creating a weird different drafts, because it really didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. But people would I don't know if they saw me and knew that I was going to take Najee, so they thought it'd be funny to take Najee, which is perfectly fine, because I already have 300 other Najee teams, so I have every combination probably at this point. But
okay, so let me ask you this: say you get to the 10th pick in the draft, and Christian McCaffrey is available, and so is Najee. In that case, would you have considered taking Christian McCaffrey instead of Najee, even though you valued Najee higher, because you clearly are going to be able to do a different type of construction, because Christian McCaffrey is usually the 101 or the 102. You got him at the 110. Like, you're a leg up on the field drafting this player so far. Is that something that you would have done this summer, or something you would consider doing?
So I was drafting in February of last year, and Christian McCaffrey was going in the second round occasionally, because that's just how ADP fluctuates.
Oh no, okay.
Yeah, he was going fairly late, and it's like because he had just come off his injury, so people didn't want to take that chance again. So it depends on how far. If it happened this year, I guess it would have happened to have like. Sorry, I said the same word like 4 times there. If it would have been one of my first drafts, I might have taken Najee still, and maybe he came back or created another ADP glitch kind of scenario. That I probably would have taken it, but later in the year, because the more teams I had, the more I was likely to fluctuate what I was exactly thinking.
Okay. All right. So maybe not the best example, because you could have gotten him earlier rounds, but the thought process. So if there was a different player, maybe Jonathan Taylor was never going in round 2. If Jonathan Taylor had been there available at pick 12 along with Najee Harris, at that point, would you have considered Jonathan Taylor over Najee Harris, even though you like Najee Harris better, because you would be able to have a unique construction getting like Jonathan Taylor with, I don't know, Devontae Adams or whoever else is available at that pick?
Had it been last year, I probably would have. I didn't see good things for Jonathan Taylor this year with the quarterback change. It's very my player analysis with Najee versus other players. I saw Najee being the number 1 running back in the league. So in my eyes, it's like, why would I take someone that's not going to be Najee? But in this scenario, I may take JT, because I know, I could get Najee on the turnaround, or
I suppose in this case it's not the best, because you can just take both. I'm trying to give you a game theory versus player analysis.
You can't get me off.
And
Najee.
You're just like, no, we're doing the player analysis, and I'm sticking with Najee. Okay, so there's just no scenario where we're not taking Najee. I tried to get you off him here, and it's just
as soon as he got hurt, I made that switch over. Look, I want as much Jamar Chase as I can get.
Yeah,
it's all player. I think Najee's a good player. I think I think JT's an okay player with a really good line. That's what he played with last year.
Yep. Okay. All right. So you have Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey, and Jonathan. No, not Jonathan. You don't like Jonathan Taylor. I'm trying to think of another.
Nick Chubb was going in the 3rd round.
No, I'm trying to give you a real decision point where you have the 12th overall pick and you have, Justin Jefferson, Najee Harris, and who is
I'll
somebody
go.
that you
I'll
and
go.
Jamar Chase. Would you go Jay Jets and Jamar Chase in that case instead of Najee?
Yeah, I would go. I would go Jamar Justin just because like you're never going to get that scenario ever
Okay.
happening. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Okay.
got me there. You got
Finally,
me
I
there.
found one. I found one
One
for you.
lineup, and yeah, that's it. Yeah,
All
I'll
right,
agree with
we found that scenario. I'm glad I had to give you a hypothetical where you would not take Najee. I'm glad I found it. Okay. Uh, let's talk a little bit about playoff best ball. First of all, do you play playoff best ball?
I did like 10 lineups last year. I advanced like two into the second round, and then I was out after that.
Okay. So it's not a huge thing for you. So we don't need to talk about it if it's not a big part of your life. You're not doing playoff best ball.
I mean, I'm going to run some, but it's a really tough game. I'm going to be honest. I don't really
I
have.
agree.
I don't feel like I have an edge on it,
Okay.
so I don't want to waste money if I don't have an edge.
Okay. So the difficulty for anybody who hasn't played it is you have to get players through the bye week, and generally teams that are on bye. So the top team in each conference is on bye in the first week of playoff best ball, and those are generally the teams that are most likely to make the Super Bowl. Of course, last year we had the Titans. I don't think
Titans,
many
yeah.
people actually felt the need to
No.
draft the Titans anyway, but they clearly have a leg up because they get that bye. So one last game they have to win to get there, and you have to then of course get teams through that are going to have enough players in the final. So it's a really difficult equation to figure out. Like, do I draft this year it'll be probably the Eagles. Like, do I draft Eagles players even though I can't use them at all in week one? How many Eagles players can I draft and still draft a team that can get through round one? It is definitely a very difficult equation.
It's also difficult because you don't even know who's in the playoffs yet on the AFC side. It's a
Right.
very close race
Currently.
between a bunch of teams,
Yeah.
and you're going to want one of those wild card teams, I think. And it's like you kind of know what's kind of happening on the NFC side, and it's like you're kind of wasting money potentially if you're just throwing out teams for the AFC teams, other than if you go Chiefs or I'm trying to think who else is left out
Bills.
there. Chiefs, Bills, one of those two teams at least. You don't
Yeah.
know who's going to actually make the playoffs at this point.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I
that's
love
true.
the Bengals. I have a feeling that they could easily rock it out to the Super Bowl again, but they could also just get bumped out of the playoffs because it's that close out there.
Right. The Bengals, the Dolphins, like a lot of these teams that I'm like,
Yeah, the Dolphins.
I build some lineups where I'm just like, okay, these I know that Tua is going to be there, or I'm fairly confident. I'm not sure if they've locked it up, but I'm fairly confident that they're not going to get the bye week, and he's going to be playing in round one. So then when I do that, if I draft Tua, then I'm like, well, I'm just going to assume here, build this lineup for the Dolphins going all the way, and maybe just do one quarterback. But it's definitely it's a different equation than regular season best
They're
ball.
going to be on the bubble too. If they lose this week to the Bills, they're going to be, eight and something, and it's like they're like 2 games out, and it's not very many games left, but
Yeah.
it's risking it.
Yeah.
This cold weather games for these Dolphins boys are not looking good.
No, it's not a fun one for them in Buffalo. Yeah, it's going to be tough with snow, and I think snow is in the forecast.
4 inches or something like that.
Oh
Yeah.
God, yeah, it's poor them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had mentioned that you drafted Christian McCaffrey, and you started drafting in February last year.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: when do you believe is the best time to draft for best ball?
I think it depends on the drafter. Personally, I think I have an edge on knowing what rookies are good or what where they might stand later like in the season. I think also like the more news that comes out, the better it is for for the everyday drafter who's not like focused in on the NFL like solely every day. I would say it's probably better if you draft later in the season.
Okay, so in general, for most players, probably better later in the season, but for you, because you think you have a good read on rookies and stuff, it's better maybe to draft a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, for people that don't know the equation here, it's you have more information later on. So if you're more casual, maybe it's helpful to just have all of that information, like where did the rookies go, which teams are they playing on, which players are hurt, but if you draft early, like you said, you can get guys like Christian McCaffrey in the second round.
Yeah.
Whereas
Saquon was going on the third, in the early drafts.
Alvin Kamara was like very late after
Yeah.
it was like there was a potential suspension, and then he started going.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't end up doing all that great this year anyway. But
Right.
there are big examples of players that'll go from Damian Pierce was a great example. When I started doing best ball drafts,
40% Damian Pierce in the big board. So
that was helpful. Yeah, he was going like around pick 140 early on when I started drafting, and I wasn't taking him. I didn't know who this guy was. He
You
didn't
watch his
look.
college tape. It is something to watch. It
Is
is
it really?
incredible. Yeah, like he is a scary individual.
Okay, well, I wish I watched that because I missed out. And then
Yeah.
by the time best ball season wrapped up, he was going around pick like 70, 60. I don't know. He was
Yeah, he was only the
really,
fifth round. It was insane. I was getting him in the last round right off the rip, and then it's like, and then the draft happens, and he kind of went up a couple rounds, and then any kind of talk, he shot up so fast after
he
that
did.
first preseason game.
Yep. And same thing, like Isaiah Pacheco was a guy that I was drafting in the last round consistently throughout like July. And then by like late August, Isaiah Pacheco was going, 7 rounds earlier than he had been during July. So lot of examples of those players that just,
It kind of worked
I don't
the
know.
inversely too, because after watching that Seahawks Bears preseason game, I jumped off board. I was like, they may not score a point all season.
Justin Fields, you're talking about.
Yeah, Justin Fields and the Seahawks. Like, I jumped off completely. I was on them because they had to like a lot of like bringbacks for my players. But after watching them, they were just so bad.
I had 3 total shares out of 150 on Justin Fields. And I remember it distinctly. I had just started thinking, maybe I need to really focus on Justin Fields getting more of those lineups. And then I talked to a friend of mine who was like, he is terrible. I've been watching the Bears. Justin Fields is awful. And I was just like, all right, I didn't even watch the game. I was just like, I'm taking your word for it. He's not any good. I'm not going to, I stopped drafting him. So got 3 total shares. And I now hate that friend. I've stopped talking. No, I'm just kidding. He's still a friend of mine. Okay, yeah, it's I also got stopped drafting Fields sadly, and did not benefit from that. So was kind of hoping that his injury, not career ending, but like maybe keep him out for like the rest of the regular season. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna hurt me when he's playing the Lions in week
Yeah.
17 if I manage to get a team through.
Did you happen to what was your quarterback strategy for draft for best ball?
So for me, I think it's a little bit of OCD that I want to get my stacks in early. I was largely drafting
I'm
quarterbacks fairly
similar.
early. So I mean, we talked about, I think you and I both had our highest exposures were Trey Lance, or he
Yes.
was my highest exposure. I guess the other one is not an example of this. You and I both drafted a ton of Zach Wilson. So we both whiffed on the quarterbacks this year. But in general, for me, it was who can I stack? Like I wouldn't, I would never take a quarterback, or I would rarely take a quarterback before I had somebody that I could pair them with. So like I wouldn't I would rarely take Josh Allen unless I had drafted Diggs already. Or if I thought I'm going to be able to draft Josh Allen with Gabe Davis right away. Like I wanted to get those stacks sealed up quickly. Um, so it was kind of rare for me to take a quarterback without having a stacking partner already, which I don't know that that's necessarily a strategy decision I made so much as an OCD. Like I want to get my stacks done. I don't want to risk like taking Lamar Jackson and then somebody else taking Rashad Bateman and me not being able to stack him with anybody I want to stack him with. That kind of thing was for me. What did you have a different strategy for quarterbacks?
It was I tried to go with the elite quarterback. If I wasn't able to do that, that's when I went with Zach Wilson, which I had a very high exposure. I was trying to pull up my exposures right here. My highest one was Zach Wilson at 47% this year, and then with Justin Herbert below that. So I had a lot of Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson stacks, which felt good until this past week. And
Yeah.
then I know I have like in my advancing ones, I have like four Josh Allen, Justin Field teams. So I'm pretty
Nice.
excited about that. Like the elite quarterback was like key for a lot of things this year. I feel like you had to have an
Yeah.
elite quarterback. Like the other than Geno and Jared Goff and Justin Fields, the rest were kind of eh.
Yep.
Like
No, I think like actually like not just elite, but like bully quarterback. Like having two
yeah,
elite quarterbacks
yeah,
worked out really well this year. The one I guess point against that is you could get those elite quarterbacks with Justin Fields and Tua pretty
yeah,
late. So it's like you
yeah.
either a lot of my advancing teams have like you know Patrick, I'm looking right now. Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts. Of course, Kyler Murray now doesn't help me now, but Jalen Hurts and Dak, or Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, or Patrick. So I actually advanced a number of what I would call bully quarterback teams, where I have 2 quarterbacks that I took within the top 100, and then also a number though that I have like one elite quarterback who I took early, and then Tua in those some of those lineups.
I
So
have 1% Tua. It's pretty bad.
oh no, yeah, it's
Yeah, it's all right.
not helpful.
Nah,
So no Tua, no Justin Fields. That's not a recipe for success this year.
nah. I had 20% Josh Allen and 30% Justin Herbert, who's on the amend in my opinion. So
Yeah, yeah. No,
That
that
Trey
is
Lance,
helpful.
Zach Wilson was tough. That
Yeah,
was tough.
yeah, that was really tough. I mean, what are you gonna do? You can't predict a game one injury to Trey Lance. He looked like he was ready to break out, and
Yeah,
had all of the weapons, but
yeah. And then
unfortunately
Zach
couldn't.
Wilson. And I mean any quarterback, and you put Baker Mayfield back there. You literally put anybody back there, and they're looking good.
Yeah,
Zach Wilson. I don't know what happened to that guy. I mean, he wasn't really good in general, but it's like you just have to throw the ball in the direction of these pass catchers, and
right.
you're good.
Yeah, and he was just incapable of that, and we apparently missed out on that player evaluation. Thought he was going to be better than. Yeah, I mean, he was better last year than he was
I
this
think I
year.
liked his opportunity more than I actually liked the player itself.
Yep. Yeah,
And
me
his
too.
and his playoff matchups were they're incredible. So like
Yep.
if
I
you
mean, it
have
was
you have your Jets players, you're going to be looking good in the playoffs.
people were taking Elijah Moore around pick 60.
Yes.
And then Garrett Wilson was like this really high upside young guy who was going around pick
One.
120.
Yeah.
So it was like, I actually did not draft much Elijah Moore, but I would frequently, like, if I got sniped on a one of my stacks early on when I wanted Joe Burrow and somebody took him, then I would go ahead and draft Garrett Wilson around pick 120. And
Yeah.
then, of course, if I had Garrett Wilson, then I'd want to stack with Zach Wilson. It just didn't make sense for how high Elijah Moore was going. And then, I liked Garrett Wilson a lot. I actually like Corey Davis quite a bit. And then
Their tight ends Conklin and CJ Uzama, like
right,
they were set up for like this amazing
yeah,
passing attack,
and
and
still you
even
could get
and they
Zach
had Brees
Wilson.
Hall,
Yeah,
Michael Carter, and apparently Zonovan Knight. That's like
right.
their offense is amazing, but
Yeah,
they just didn't have the right guy back there.
yeah, and you could get Zach Wilson around pick 200. So the thought
Yeah,
was he's got all these weapons, and still nobody wants a quarterback. Like this
yeah,
is a smash spot for him. So
yeah.
it made sense at the time. It turned out he's just not any good, and they needed to bring a new quarterback in to make those stacks work. I still have a number of Zach Wilson lineups that advanced
Same here.
because Garrett Wilson did
Because
so
Garrett
well.
Wilson's
So
so good. Yeah.
it's sort of worked out backwards for us. So can't really complain. All right, Seth1374. I'm just gonna ask you a few more questions here. Seth1314 asks, what do you think is more important, hard work or stick to itiveness?
Uh,
I,
go with hard work.
I think he was trolling with the question.
I agree. I think I saw that one. I mean, hard work is more important, but I am pretty stick to this.
okay.
I like my takes. Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to back off my player analysis when I make my mind up just because something happens. I guess and
Yeah.
maybe that's the way he's. I mean, I know it was probably a joke question, but if you have a player take, I would say stick to it. Maybe you're not wrong, even though like Najee Harris probably looks terrible to the most people, but if you really look at it, he was injured right at the rip, probably a little rusty when he came in and was still recovering.
Yeah.
And it's taken a little while. And he's got a smash spot this week against Carolina. Who knows? He
Might
could
might work out for you.
Yeah. I still have a bunch of Najee Harris advancing. That was a
Yeah.
good thing about like, and I know that I had this debate with Eric or and whatnot, but it's like he doesn't think like he has enough juice to score the amount of points that you need it for the playoffs, but I think that he does. But it's like you just have to get him there, and like I don't think that many people are going to have a high advanced rate. Najee Harris, I might be like one of the only few people that do.
Yeah.
So he could be the guy that wins me or tanks me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that has been a big debate. Like, so I've watched a lot of best ball content the past couple of weeks as I've been really getting into it, and the debate is who do you want now? So like Josh Jacobs smashing all year. Do you want Josh Jacobs on your teams now? I mean, he clearly helped you get to the playoffs, but now what's he going to be? 40% owned on advancing teams? Like he's going to
And,
be pretty high owned.
and do you want him against 49ers in week 17? Because I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's that is the question. Do you want the guys that get you to the playoffs, or do you want the guys that are going to be unique in the playoffs? Which is, Jonathan Taylor. Now you don't believe in his talent, but he's a guy that didn't get many people to the playoffs, and now if you have him, you at least got him at really low ownership. So that is kind of the debate. Do you want the guys that have been crushing it, or do you want the guys that maybe not many people are going to have, but you believe? And
Provide
an
upside.
example, the Jamar Chase is probably a good example that you can get behind. Yeah, Jamar Chase, a guy that you're going to want. He was out for a while, didn't necessarily get you to the playoffs, but if you got there, despite him, now he's a great play in the playoffs. So that's that is the debate, and maybe Najee is one of those guys that maybe didn't help you get there, but now that he's there against Carolina, he puts up 40 fantasy points. You're probably advancing all your teams. So
yep.
Yep. It's a fun debate. Okay. You and I met briefly at the Tournament of Champions. How did you enjoy the live final experience at the Tournament of Champions?
I want to win another seat to that thing. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I all my scheduled events got canceled. I guess I didn't hit the fourth invite email
Oh,
list or whatever. I don't know how many invites you got to sign up for the thing, but I kept signing up and submitting, but it didn't go through. But I
yeah.
had a lot of fun anyways. We went to Top Golf. All the dinner events were awesome. They gave us a bunch of money to eat and drink. So
Yeah.
what can I look else? And then I met like all these people, and I watch Awesemo. I watch everybody's con. I have at my job. I don't. It's kind of a mindless job. I just type all day, and so I can listen to Awesemo stuff all day. I get to listen to my buddies at Spike Week and whatnot. So it's a pretty fun job where I can listen to stuff. And
Yeah.
so it was like kind of crazy to meet Renpack and you
Yeah.
and others like Will Hugh, the guy that sent one of the questions in. I got to meet
Yeah.
him there and whatnot. It's like I got to meet all these crazy cool people while I was
Yeah.
there, and I got to see like I didn't talk. I didn't want to be rude, like interrupt conversations and whatnot. So I got to see like Big T and Whistles Go Woo and Travis Petty.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to see like all these big names in the company or in the space out there.
Yeah, it's a really fun experience, and that one's I think it's unique. I think even like at the Tournament of Champions, you get fewer of those guys that you know from online than like the Fantasy Football World Championship. I think is one that more like pros are looking for. So like you'd probably recognize even more guys, which I've never been to. I've only been to the TOC, but I imagine those ones you have more pros than the Tournament of Champions, where it's kind of a mishmash of some pros and then some just Millie Maker winners throughout the week, so maybe don't play a ton of volume. But yeah, it was definitely a very fun experience. It's all you can eat, all you can drink essentially all weekend, and just hanging out with all of these great DFS players.
Well, and I won the best ball tournament so late, so I only had like a few weeks to kind of get everything situated, a couple things situated. So I was like, oh shoot, I'm going down here. That's awesome. And it's like,
yeah,
I won $1 million now. I get a fly down for a paid hotel. Like, yes, please.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so you mentioned your day job. Do you plan on keeping it for long? I mean, I know you won the Millie. You don't necessarily need the day job still. Do you think you're going to be keeping the day job? And what is the day job actually?
I work for an insurance company as a data analyst. I just make sure that the agents do their job. I just type in all the ads and deletes of vehicles. It's kind of hard to say right now whether I'm going to keep the job, but I think 3 more years gives me enough time. We're thinking about moving closer to the beach.
Nice.
Have that nice lifestyle. So I might work until I get that. I can afford that lifestyle and whatnot, and maybe I get lucky and I can do it sooner. We're looking at 200K, and then we're out of here.
All right, that's a good goal. Just like know where you got to get. You're in, I forget, South Carolina. Where are you now?
North Carolina, right
North
outside
Carolina.
of LA. Yeah.
Okay, but you are from I'm forgetting you. You said this before the show. We talked about it.
So I was born in California, San Diego.
That's right. You're born in California, then you moved to Illinois.
Moved right next to Belleville, Illinois, Muskegon, Illinois, right next to where me and Eric met. Which is like, it's so crazy that we're in the same space. He was my quarterback. I was his offensive lineman, and like his dad was my head coach, freshman head coach. It's like,
oh, funny.
Yeah, it's like we have like all these things, and it's just happened to be we're in the same space. It's weird. It's really weird.
I mean, you're not just in the same space. You are kind of leaders of the space. I mean, you're both guys that are respected in the space. So it is pretty strange. Yeah. Oh, I mean, you won the Millie Maker.
Again, that was my very worst team that was like that went through. It got super lucky. Those 15, 16, 17 groupings, it changed everything. I needed a 0-point game from Devontae Parker week 16. That was more stressful than winning the $1 million. I know that you asked that question at the end of the thing, but winning the ticket to get to the final was more than everything to me.
So you needed Devontae Parker to get actually 0 fantasy points. And
0 fantasy points, yeah. And that was the game that Jalen Waddle scored like 30 fantasy points, and I don't forget who they were playing. It might have been the Saints. And he tore it up, and Devontae Parker got 0. It was crazy.
That is insane. Yeah, that's quite the run out to get there.
Yeah.
I am going to ask you that question. Actually, one more question first. Because we've talked a little bit about DFS. This is the rare show that we didn't really talk much about DFS. But were you a high? No, it's because that's the way I wanted to go. I want to talk about best ball. Were you a high volume DFS player prior to winning the Millie, and have you played much this year with some extra juice in your bank account?
I invested. So the guy, I think of his name. You had him on a few episodes, the Rainmakers, and he was playing best ball, taking people.
Wiley. Yeah.
Matt Wiley. Yeah. I'm heavily invested in Rainmakers right now. I would say that I pretty much only play with what I get for my work, so it's like kind of still low volume. It's like $200 to $300 a week, not very much, and but mainly it's just Rainmakers and trying to like recoup all my losses from best ball this year.
Okay.
It's been a lot of fun.
Still not that involved in DFS. You're still mostly you do the kind of niche stuff. You do the best ball and then the Rainmakers. Not
Rainmakers is where it's at. Like I won. Let's see here. I won 80 tickets week 1 to the Millie Maker because nobody was playing it. So I was like, I was putting in dead lineups, but it was like so much overlay that like it was just free money, and it still is kind of on the showdown slates. If you have cards, it's like a free $3 pretty much.
All right, maybe I need to start thinking about. I have not done any Rainmakers. I literally have not played, I think, a single Rainmakers contest.
It is work, but it keeps away a lot of people who don't want to actually work in that space. It does take some time.
Yeah, it takes away some of the competition. Probably there are plenty of sharks who are like, well, I make enough at DFS. Why am I going to bother with this extra work of Rainmaker? So it's probably smart to focus.
Yeah. And I'm at the low end. I'm not at where Matt Wiley is and playing the high stakes.
Right. Yeah, he's playing very high stakes.
He's at a different level than I
am. Okay, so I think that was the final question that I had for you, at least written down. Except for, of course, as you alluded to, the final question that I always like asking every guest. Tell me about your favorite best ball / DFS win and or win celebration.
So I can't not talk about the best ball Millie making championship win. It was kind of incredible. Like Najee had not done anything all game really. He had one big run in the second quarter, and it's the fourth quarter. I'm in second place, pretty well ahead second. And it was like 4 points behind first place, and I'm just sitting there on the couch. It's like 2 minutes to go. The Steelers could easily just nail the ball and whatnot, and it'd be okay. And I was already calculating how much I had to pay on 250 taxes. I was kind of disappointed I didn't get to go to the tournament champions or whatnot, and they ran the ball twice, and it got a few yards here and there. But it's like, okay, well now they can just kneel it and call it a day. They ran it a third time, and it was like it just parted for him. Before he even hit the hole, I was running around my house screaming and hollering with my wife. Was like, did he win? Did he get it? I'm just screaming up and down my hallway. My kids were sleeping. I don't know how they stayed asleep, but they were sleeping. And then shortly after, I made a little silly video about me winning the best ball championship on Twitter.
I forgot about that. I remember the video at the time. It was, I forgot that you had made a video. Yes. Don't you for me, I do not celebrate a touchdown until a minute later, because I so often you see 30 seconds later, oh, there's a flag on the play. You're just oh, by the way, there's a flag. It's a holding. None of that. If that would happen,
I would have been so devastated. I threw my glasses flew off. I had no idea whether he actually scored or not, but I was running around the house like you did.
you didn't even wait and watch to see if he
scored. No, I didn't see the play actually until 3 weeks later.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
You could have just been don't check the internet, just assume you won a million.
I'm telling myself I won. They didn't really run any replays because it was all on Big Ben because it was his last home game or whatever.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it's they wouldn't really mattered about what he was doing. It was about what Big Ben was doing, crying or something.
That is an awesome story to win it like that. You said though, was it 250,000 a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was not as big of a drop off as you often see, which is a million and then 100,000 or 150 in some of the big contests. So at least I guess it wouldn't have been that devastating to just win 250,000 instead. Yeah. But still, that is. Do you know the guy who won the person who won second place?
No, I tried to figure out who he was on Twitter, see if he was on Twitter. I couldn't find anything, but
okay.
I felt terrible, but
I mean, relative to the tournament of champions, I guess 2 years ago. It was similar to best ball this year. You either win a milli or you win zero. And there was a guy who lost on a last second play. So, and this year, the guy who was winning the milli in best ball had a 12-point lead going into the final day. And
Evan Ingram.
It's you can't feel too bad for the guy who wins $250,000 relative to the people where they were winning milli and then they won zero. Not nearly as devastating. Of course, you can still feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Anyway. Felix, thank you so much for coming on. This is a really great conversation. Love talking some best ball, and I'm gonna have to check out your YouTube channel. As we were talking about before the show, you don't really share it that often on Twitter, so I was like, I thought I knew that you were involved with this company. I'd seen the logo a little bit, but I don't think I've ever actually seen. I've only ever seen you on other people's streams when you've
Yeah.
been a guest. So I'll have to check that out. But tell me where can people find you?
I'm over at Best Ball Nation, and it's just me. I go well during the drafting season. I'll be on just about every day, but during this kind of off season of best ball, I'm usually on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at
Okay,
9 p.m.
that's on YouTube.
Yes,
Best Ball Nation YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
And on Twitter, you are at Crying Buffalo, and
Yes.
those are the places people can find you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
I'm sorry, I don't have much else.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, that's plenty of places for people to find you if you want to watch some of Felix's content throughout the year. I'm sure you'll be doing some best ball content coming up next year as well. Cool. Well, thanks a lot again, Felix, for coming on to High Stakes episode 28. Thank you to Mike Lawrence for producing. As always, you can find Mike on Twitter at Awesemo. And thank you for watching High Stakes episode 28. You'll be able to find High Stakes episode 29 2 weeks from the release date of this episode on Friday around 2 o'clock Eastern. Thanks for watching. Good luck.